Two things can be true and often are at the same time. So it is really bloody annoying when you can't get the tail out. But in some situations, it also means that the pitch has changed. So as a side, you are out there pissed off, mumbling to yourselves and hoping they finally spoon one up in the air. But there is also part of you that also thinks, if the number 9 and 11 can bat nearly an entire session, then yes, your chase is higher, but maybe the wicket is different. And often, it just doesn't matter, right? You finally end the partnership and your opening batter nicks off to a freak wide ball, and then you look up and remember that you forgot to pick a real number 3 for this match. But on other days, the pitch has changed so much that your batters who were used to the minefield earlier are suddenly like going for a stroll. South Africa should have been panicked. They should have run themselves out or found wacky and mysterious ways to get dismissed. Instead, this was strangely the calmest chase of a team who is the exact worst in these moments. Remember when Steve Smith was standing at first slip, but not like any position we had ever seen before. It is the shortest first slip with a helmet on. On occasion, short second and third slips are used, but rarely at first, and part of the reason is because the ball does actually carry a lot more in those positions, but also because you end up kind of like next to the wicketkeeper, meaning it's hard for the wicketkeeper or first slip to dive correctly. And a few overs earlier, we saw that issue. A genuine edge from Markram, and it didn't carry to Carey, but the short first slip didn't really feel like they could dive for it. Or even perhaps they didn't have time to because they were so close. Fielding at short first slip is not really anything you can practice for. But prior to play on day 3, Steve Smith was doing slips catches with the helmet on. So he was practicing that part. So perhaps later, that is why he took over from Khawaja in that made up dangerous position. The issue was that the ball that came to him was not low and short. It was flying, and it took Smith's finger almost clean off. It's possible his finger was mashed up because of the helmet, because he was taking a normal, if not fast-moving chance, but his fingers seemed to get awfully close to his helmet, which is such a weird thing for a slip fielder. And after this, Australia did not take a wicket for 51 overs. And when they finally did, the game was basically over. South Africa clocked this chase. Brian Lara used pot plants to work on his placement. John Wright glued his glove to his bat. Sachin Tendulkar dug up practice pitches. Tatenda Taibu cut the top off his bat. Claire Taylor used a hockey grip. Steve Smith was from tennis. Dean Jones would call phantom runs. And Victor Trumper turned the nets into a war zone to survive. The best batters in the world do whatever they have to make runs. We have told their stories in our new book, The Art of Batting. In the long history of South Africans' miserable time in major tournaments, the biggest issue is, well, usually the chase, right? It tortures them the most. Like they're unable to simply execute what they would do in a regular game time and time again. I won't relitigate all the occurrences because I've done entire videos just on this topic. I've probably done articles, I've probably done podcasts, I've done everything you could ever think of on this topic. First World Cup since readmission had a bad chase, and since then, there have been plenty of others. My rule for big chases in tests is that at one stage, the batting lineup will look comfortable, like it is going to happen. However, this wasn't quite a big chase, right? They were only going after 280, which is more of a high middling total, and it was starting on day 3, so it should have been easier than normal. But this is South Africa in a game with world in the title. So there should have been a lot of issues, even on a flatter wicket. But when Markram pushes through the offside, it is hard to say that the wicket just hasn't changed. This isn't Stark and Hazelwood frustrating anyone, because Markram's shot would have been almost impossible on a pitch that we saw in the first few days. But he did it so easily and was so composed. And remember, as we mentioned before, they came in with a makeshift number 3 who really struggled in the first knock. But in the second innings, he was playing a lot better. And Mulder can bat. Whether he's a test number 3 is debatable. It's probably not even debatable, but you get what I'm saying. But clearly in that first innings, it was a job too far. But when the pitch became easier, he did really well. In fact, his wicket was a surprise in the second innings, whereas in the first innings, it was an inevitability. Australia had barely looked like taking a wicket at all. So this certainly could have swung it back. Australia's what-if moment follows soon after. Had Steve Smith been in a normal spot, he might have taken this catch, with his finger still attached. It's not to say that that was their only chance, though. There was some low bounce. In fact, in the space of a couple of balls, they had it from either end. And generally, if that happens early in the innings, you would expect that to get worse as the game went on. It really never did. even if it was there for most of the innings. There was one particular over from Lyon later on that gave Markram some issues. And again, this was the 23rd over. It was pretty early on. So you would assume that over time, it would get harder. It didn't. In fact, it's not that the ball stopped keeping low. It just never felt quite as dramatic or dangerous as it should have. South Africa's real issue was almost self-inflicted. Early on in Bavuma's innings, it felt much more like he was going to get himself out. He seemed to believe that counter-attacking was the way, and he was lucky to get away with some of it. But two things seemed to slow him down. One, of course, is the drop. But the other is the more literal halt to his momentum when he steals a run from Stark and then bends over and clutches his leg. A few overs later, we get to see the full limp. It's as if Bavuma has come off an imaginary horse or is a child wearing pads for the first time. By the 25th over, he is getting loads of treatment, and from then on in, he's crease bound. And it seems to focus his batting away from the risks of earlier, to more of a nudge and jog mode, slowing down his scoring rate and his elite running between the wickets, but allowing him to bat like the middle overs of an ODI. He is not the only thing getting slowed. Bavuma blocks the ball from Cummins on the back foot. The ball was short, but sedate. It felt like Bavuma had to hold the block for like an extra second, just waiting for the ball to turn up. It's very clear to Australia at this point that this is not a wicket where you can blow through players anymore. In fact, that could not be more obvious a while later when Aiden Markram plays an extraordinary shot. It is off the slower bowler Bo Webster, someone who Australia has kept out of the attack for a long time. But the shot is a thing of beauty. A front foot straight back guide to third, and he's just in scary control of this. And even within this, it would be wrong to say that the ball didn't do anything. There was the odd explosion off the wicket for both of the Australian off-spinners, but not enough, and usually they just ended up safe. And I would say it was almost another surprise wicket when Sam Constance dives forward at deep mid-wicket to almost pick up Bavuma's sweep. It felt like Constance was just a second too late in seeing the ball. In fact, there was another moment where they almost got a wicket by luck. Aiden Markram smashes a straight drive and Hazelwood almost gets a hand on it. And he doesn't, and it goes off to the boundary. And it's only later that people noticed that Bavuma would have got caught short because he had his bat in his wrong hand. But the ball didn't hit the Aussie fingers or the stumps. Australia's chances are barely that. Explosions, almost catches, and a flyby attempt at a run-out. There are other days when this would have been enough. In fact, Australia even forced a ball change through at the end of the 53rd over. Quite often in England, that can change things very dramatically. It didn't. Instead, Markram brings up his 100, and the game with 28 wickets in 2 days has had 4 on the third. And Australia is well out of it. There is some rain overnight, and it seems that there is slightly more life at the wicket for what is going to be the final day. And that is evident when there are some plays and misses early on, but then Bavuma nicks his behind. Is this what Australia need? Because even a slither of movement is quite often enough to Cummins and Hazelwood at their best. Markram is beaten soon after, and it's good movement. Easy to see without Hawkeye or anything else. The sort of thing that Australia was dying for the previous day. Unfortunately for the Aussies, the following ball, Markram hammers one through the offside. There's actually a fielder out on the rope, and he doesn't even get to it. But this replacement ball does do a little bit. Cummins nips one back, and Stubbs misses it before jogging off for a leg by. Australia review, obviously in hope, and with not much of that. It's nowhere near nothing, and the next ball Markram smashes away another boundary. A few overs later, they donate another review. They barely appeal for a caught behind, and they review it anyway. This one doesn't matter as much because next ball, Stubbs misses one that takes the top of his bails. This is the first time since Rickleton was out that you start to think, oh, this could go wrong. The second new ball is coming. And in the first inning, South Africa lost 5 for 10. There are reasons to believe if you're Australian and reasons to be terrified if you're South African. But South Africa looks fairly calm, if not a little bit more muted. And it's Australia who look desperate. And another review comes. At this point, the South African fans start to take over in the stadium. South Africa on the field are a little bit more tight, but they are saved by a couple of threes. They're not quite edging their way to victory, but they're certainly legging it. Those two balls actually help relieve a lot of tension. But shortly after that, a ball is flicked to Shortleg's foot and ends in his hands. It kind of looks okay, but it's also very possible it went straight from the shoe up in the air. And it's shown straight away that it bounced first. The South African fans are so nervous at this point that no one remembers to chant, "Same old Aussies, always cheating." With 1 over to go before the new ball, South Africa decide to try and score faster as Markram attempts a slog sweep that is a bit ugly, but he just gets away with it. Lion bowls so well in the rest of that over that they kind of give up that tactic. And it doesn't matter at all, because the first delivery with the second new ball, Markram whacks it. He keeps attacking as well. If this was Australia's last chance, and maybe that was dead already, he is determined to end it. Except Markram is out at the back end of that over. And how can you not think about Heinrich Klaasen getting out to Hardik Pandya? Again, it is a moment where the contest is over. South Africa have won. But that's the problem. South Africa have often won until they don't. I mean, there is no way that South Africa won't win. But until they have, as calm and collected and brilliant as this chase has been, there's almost no way of emotionally accepting it. Plus, Verreynne is playing some of the weirdest shots ever. In fact, in what would be the last over, South Africa decided to give Australia one more chance. Years ago, my club team put the scores level with 5 wickets in hand, and then they lost 5 for none. If there was ever another team who could do this, it would be South Africa. I mean, technically, due to the countback laws, it might not have mattered. But in my mind, I start to wonder if South Africa can somehow spook the playing conditions to ensure that they will still lose. And while this is happening, Verreynne tries to scoop the ball for victory. Instead, he gets the ball off his glove. The umpire is not sure, even if the Australians are. But they have no reviews. This is the kind of thing that usually would have gone against South Africa. Now it happens too late, and they're still on the right side of it. Now, all we can wait for is the winning shot. It's not an MS Dhoni or Carlos Brathwaite flourish. It's a toe-ended full toss that kind of squirts away into a gap. It's like the first Ali versus Liston fight. It isn't pretty, but it doesn't matter. South Africa had to chase, of all the teams, and they did it over 2 days to win their first world title. Yes, the pitch changed. So did South Africa. Ross Taylor couldn't see at night or when the clouds were in. Eventually, he had to see an eye specialist who would fix his eyesight. In the 2 years before the change, he still averaged more than 50 in international cricket. The top level of batting talent can basically see in the dark. That is who we are talking about in our new book, The Art of Batting. Head over and order your copy today.